And welcome to the Crash Chords podcast. I can't believe you. I'm going to kill him. New week, new podcast. Saw the Rose West last night. They put on a great show. That's Robert and Alex from the Wasties, other band. More of kind of a modern rock. Think Coheed and Cambria, but good. And they kind of have a sci-fi element. The album actually has a theme. So there's like an overarching story when they play live also, which is neat. They debuted a new song, which sounded pretty good, about time travel, which is always fun.
Time travel is not always fun. Sometimes you can get yourself into quite a pickle with time travel.
It depends upon your conceived time travel. If it's going to be with the inability to create paradoxes, if it's going to be, well, time travel existed in the past and anybody who went to the past has already gone to the past, so the past is immutable. It all depends on what you're conceiving as time travel.
What he said.
Am I the only one that puts on the Science Channel?
I was getting at. No, but I just assume people know. Probably to my fault. Most people don't know.
Don't know what?
I don't know. A lot of people are not interested in time travel. For some reason.
I don't find that to be true at all.
I've met a lot of people who just like zone out. Oh, no, paradoxes, too confusing. You know, give me a straightforward story.
You hang out with terrible, terrible people.
I don't hang out with them.
Oh, okay.
I've met them though at parties, much to my chagrin.
It also depends on which multiverse theory you actually ascribe to.
It's true. The proper response, Matt, should have been, you go to horrible parties, Steve.
Oh, okay. Steve, you go to horrible parties.
There you go, you got the hang of it.
Your parties are horrible, and you should feel bad.
Thanks, Zoidberg.
For those parties. Oh, Lord.
Yeah.
More of a Three Stooges, actually.
Actually, no, that's Zoidberg.
Let's get into our album of this week.
He represents the Three Stooges in one person.
I'm gonna fight you on this.
He's made those exact noises.
But not the...
Yeah,
he does.
He
Does
has.
he really?
And walked sideways, yes.
I am so disillusioned.
Yes.
So disillusioned.
So basically, you said he's delusional.
That's not the same as being disillusioned.
Yeah, but that's where I'm jumping to.
Anyway.
One letter difference, the S.
So anyway, Queens of the Stone Age.
This week's pick is my choice. It's Queen of the Stone Age's new album, Like Clockwork. And I'd been a fan of theirs since the late 90s, I think is when their first record came out. They had The Lost Art of Keeping a Secret was their first single. The band has kind of evolved kind of strangely over the years. They started this kind of kitschy kind of indie sound, and then kind of from there grew into this kind of standard rock sound. But even with that, they kind of genre jump and
I always knew
makes
as
interesting things.
Standard indie, standard 2000s
Indie rock, yeah. But their sound has kind of changed, gotten more refined a bit. I mean, the first album sounded very kind of harsh and grainy, and they've kind of refined it a bit as the years have gone by.
I knew them for their popular stuff. And their popular stuff was fun. It really was fun music.
Yeah, they have some great singles. So we'll jump right into the first track, which is the intro track on the record.
Well, just generally speaking, it's very clear that they're going in a more experimental direction here with this album. It was very noticeable with the first track, because I expected the sort of fun, rocky feel, and it didn't quite get that. Instead, it was very dark, kind of grungy.
Yeah, the first track is called Keep Your Eyes Peeled. It was like this kind of slow groove, almost slowcore kind of...
It was slowcore-y, yeah.
Kind of sound. It had a nice intro. Like, it was very different. It caught my attention, though. I thought it was a fairly good intro. It had this industrial sound, almost.
Industrial is the perfect word.
That's how I really felt it. I do have a nitpick with it. While I did enjoy the general vibe the instruments were giving off, I disliked greatly the pairing of the vocals with the plodding piano work. The keys were being played in an echoing manner with the song, with the vocals, really distracting, drowning nature to it.
I was alright with the music itself. I did feel similarly about the vocals, though. The vocals were very haunting. At the same time,
I was just going to say
there was a disconnect there.
I felt that it had that kind of haunting, lurking kind of vibe. It was supposed to be unnerving and creepy.
It was distorted. It was echo. I didn't really felt like it worked with the style of the instruments coupled with the style of the vocals.
Well, here's the thing. At this point in the album, it was too early for me to judge that.
I'm judgmental. I'm going to start judging.
At this track, they could have done any number of things with it. And also, I was going very, very shallowly here. There's a vampire on the cover, and the cover's blood red. I saw
That's a vampire?
Yeah. Seemed to be.
Okay.
The collar was pretty high.
There's also that knot symbol in it. I don't know what that was.
Yeah, I couldn't really make sense of that.
It's supposed to... The symbol on the album cover is supposed to represent a Q. The circle with the line through it on an angle.
Oh, that's their...
It's supposed to represent a Q.
That's their symbol?
It had never been before, but I imagine it is now.
Because that symbol I recognize as the circle with a line through it as
a zero. Or not, yeah. But no, I don't think that's what that's supposed to be. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be... stand for Queens of the Stone Age, but I'm not 100% on that. I mean, as far as intro tracks go, I didn't think it was that bad. I liked it. It wasn't anything phenomenal, but I thought it gave a good vibe to what I thought the album was going to be. And then, of course, we go into...
My biggest beef here was the chorus. It was awkward to me.
It was.
It pulled away. Even if they were creating something with the verse, which I still tired of, it was a very awkward transition to the chorus and back again. Wasn't on board with that.
But, and then, of course, going into the second track, I Sat by the Ocean, is where I was kind of like, oh, okay, we're not going that experimental, not initially.
This is
as pop rock as you can get this track.
As formulaic and generic as they possibly come for rock, yeah.
We even made minor comparisons to the Beatles, because it sounded like old school kind of simple Beatles.
With the twang of their later, of the vocals that you might find in the Beatles' later work.
Yeah.
Which, it was extreme for then.
But for nowadays, it's extremely unimpressive. There is nothing in it to differentiate it.
It's unimpressive if you don't hear John Lennon's voice.
As
soon as you hear his voice,
this song, I Sat by the Ocean, it was just unimpressive in all aspects. There was not a single distinctive feature that did anything for me.
And it had
Beatles-esque. It had junk lyrics, really.
Beatles-esque, but without the personality.
Exactly.
That's.
I mean, I didn't hate the song. I didn't love it. I kind of did. It was just meh. It was average. It was not. I mean, there was nothing to really hate about it. It was just generic pop rock. It was just.
I'd really have to strain to pick out specific parts of this song. One thing was there's a little guitar suspension that holds over into the next verse. That was interesting, but it just seemed courtesy. I didn't really know how to take it.
This is kind of a quick song to go over because again, it was generic. I mean, that's the easiest way to describe it.
Boring.
It was just wasn't bad, wasn't good. It was just generic and boring.
On the other hand, it was kind of a fast track.
It was upbeat. Yeah.
It went no. I mean
not upbeat.
I mean it's a short track. That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh yeah.
It goes by pretty quickly as opposed to the previous track, which is sort of a 5-minute song that feels its length. Yeah. This one is kind of fleeting.
Yeah. And I don't know if it was intentional to be fleeting, but it definitely gives a very fleeting vibe.
And then the last thing about this track is that it has an outro here that I almost feel it didn't warrant the eeriness of the outro is eerie and the track is not. So I understand that it was used purely for the purposes of transition to the next track, which has a bit of an eerie vibe, but maybe that's the point at which you shouldn't bother transitioning.
The only reason that didn't bother me is because in the past, on their other albums, when they want to do an intro to the next track, they never put it actually at the beginning of the next track. It's always at the outro of the previous track, because they've done it a few times on their other records.
So you think it's just I
think it's just their thing. They're
splitting hairs,
I think it's what they do.
If they had just cut it
and put it elsewhere
rather than after.
I think it's designed to do that way.
But still, you see my point. I'm not sure that because it was designed to blend.
Not forgiving, just explaining.
Fair enough.
That's this style. They typically do that in the past.
And to throw back one more time, I did like the outro on the first track.
Yeah.
I did like that. The cello outro on the first track, which we neglected to mention, had that nice gritty nature to it, which, again, it may not have served well as went into this pop track here, but it worked well for that track. In many cases, it's the opposite problem. It worked well with the prior track. This one doesn't work well with the prior track. Works better with the later track.
And the next track is The Vampire of Time and Memory. So this was even more kind of random than the last two tracks. They weren't kind of hitting any kind of consistency in sound. This song starts with a very pretty piano intro. It's got a sad, lost vibe, and it's, I liked it, but it was one of those songs that it was just kind of so unexpected, especially compared to the previous two tracks.
I was finally starting to enjoy the album with this track, because the first two ones, honestly, did nothing for me. This actually started to have emotions I was getting. It did have that beautiful little piano intro with synth work tossed in to add a little bit of discord to it. I know Steve did not appreciate the synth distortion.
I think it's just to take it or leave it for me. It may be the kind of thing that you think adds to the track. I really didn't feel so. Because when you look at the bare bones nature of the track, you're just looking at piano, vocals, kind of soft, kind of soothing almost, with a little bit of eeriness to it. Probably because of the way the piano was mixed. I mean, well, it could be mixing, or it could have been the way it was actually performed. It was an upright piano, or it sounded like upright spin. It's something cheap. You're not getting a grand classical piano sound.
Right.
It sounds like it's... I think I've mentioned this before a few times in the podcast. It seems to be done so much these days. Upright piano in the middle of an empty auditorium. So you have that extensive reverb sound coming from a cheap piano. It's a nice effect, because it has sort of a haunting nature to it inherently. I'm getting a little tired of it, in a general sense.
I guess, but I felt it worked for this song.
Right.
I really kind of liked the way it aided this song.
It did work for this song, but it's like if they were going to go with that, then go full force, which is why I may not have felt so appreciative of the sound in which John is talking about, that synth sound.
Right.
Because once you throw in synth with an empty, that takes away the haunting nature.
I liked the synth sound, though. I don't know. It might have just been something with...
It is a haunting synth, but it lessens the purity of it.
I felt like it added.
I thought it emphasized it as well.
And later on, when they brought in the guitar, the bass, the drums, and blended it all together with the original piano work, I felt, and they started adding a little more. I was more on board
with that.
Yeah,
and they were adding in synth, and I was still enjoying that slight discord inherent in the melodies.
There was something about maybe just hearing it independent of everything else that threw me. But yeah, right. With everything else, it grew on me. The track grew on me as it went on.
It spoke to the lyrics. To be...
Can't read your own handwriting. Well done.
I'm looking at the wrong part.
Oh.
Or not to be... Oh, wait, wrong song. Not a song at all, damn it.
Thanks. To be vulnerable is needed most of all if you intend to truly fall apart. There's a definite discord nature in their lyrical work in this song. First time I'm pointing at lyrics and going, oh, I like what he says. Yeah. It definitely created that feel.
In the track title, Vampire of Time and Memory, you consider a creature that sucks the blood and sucks the life out of you, and you put that in the context of time and memory, that's very visceral.
It is very visceral, and it's almost a metaphor for a bad relationship, not even like a bad romantic relationship, but any bad relationship sucks the time and memory out of your life. And that's kind of very strong imagery.
And that is actually present in songs later on. There's also the concept of substance abuse could be this vampire, which is also present in future songs. This is almost setting, well, almost, not quite, not even.
It very loosely sets the tone for the rest of the record.
Well,
very
this was
loosely.
a theme, loosely because there's so much stuff in between.
Right.
But
this
is a gem for the early half of this album.
Yes,
I would say.
I agree.
That's a concise way to put it.
Yeah.
And the other thing I like about this track is that it doesn't really follow the formulaic nature of the previous.
It was
not as abstract as the first track. This was a
nice middle ground.
It's a nice middle ground because they never really hit a chorus in this track. It's just verse expanding through and through. It's hard to really find. It's hard to divide the song in terms of sections, and I like that. Yeah. I enjoy being thrown.
It feels more like a piece and less like.
Exactly.
It feels like more like a classical piece where it goes through motions than just a standard song.
Yeah,
but the motions are very short and very related to their previous piece. We're not talking, a new movement here.
No. But it still feels more. It feels more composed than other tracks on the album for sure.
Yeah, it's a fluid track. I'll give it that.
moving on to track 4, If I Had a Tail. This song, I don't know what the hell to do with this song. It had this kind of groovy nature. It felt very trippy and euphoric, as if it were like a bad drug trip. I mean, it almost, at first, me and John thought it was coming from the angle of like a tomcat singing about being a tomcat, but then it takes a weird twist where the lyrics make even less sense.
It's like a tomcat strutting his stuff down the alleyway with his little, I don't even know what the female cat name is, but strutting alongside of him. He's a pimp. Like, that's the kind of vibe you almost get out of it. At the same time,
you don't really know if that's exactly what he's singing.
The lyrics are very abstract.
I'm a machine, I'm obsolete, in the land of free lobotomy. It doesn't quite fit that theme work there.
No.
And then it's the choruses are really drowned out with the harsh nature of the guitar work.
This is the kind of thing we usually, discuss and formulate these ideas beforehand, but this is one I feel it has got to be hashed out now, like, just point blank. Is there a metaphor there? Can you find a metaphor? I'm asking you. I'm not.
No, it's full of metaphors.
I have no answers.
This is all metaphor.
It's over metaphored, I feel. Like, there's that's why it's so confusing. There's too many different metaphors in this song.
I mean, specifically the metaphor from
maybe it's a robot
finding yourself to the cat in the alleyway.
Maybe it's a robot cyborg from the future.
That's so loose, though. Like,
that's sent back in time.
Read the machine line again.
I'm a machine. I'm obsolete in the land of the free lobotomy.
The free lobotomy.
Like,
it's a very curious.
It's an interesting line, but it just doesn't. I don't know. This song was very schizophrenic for me.
It's 50% solid, 50%
WTF.
I'll tell you this: it almost goes with the drug vibe that seems to be present in a few of these tracks. The idea of a free lobotomy. That's kind of drugs to some extent.
Yeah, that's true. You're killing your own brain. Yeah. I can see that. That might make more sense than anything else.
Yeah.
At this point,
I had to think this through.
It had a short little guitar solo that was nice and trippy in the middle.
Yeah, but unfortunately, the whole song was just so schizophrenic and all over the place. It's just like, I didn't dislike it, but it was another one of those tracks like track 2, where this was less generic, but still I wasn't drawn into it as much.
This track is full of contradictions. Yeah. It's got a very catchy intro. It's got a pretty catchy riff. The way the drum and the guitar work off each other, it's pretty interesting. But I'm very iffy on the vocals, and I really thought the chorus was, again, awkward choruses. I'm not sure what they're climaxing to.
Yeah.
It's a very halting nature to this chorus. If it's your thing, sure. But
there it is.
There's the sure. But I don't know. It didn't seem to work with the catchiness. Yeah. I don't want catchy into halty.
I can see where they're kind of trying to go with it. They just didn't accomplish it. It was still way too schizophrenic and disconnected. Now,
it's like what I started to said before. If you're going to do something, if you're going to be experimental, go balls to the wall experimental. This sounds like they're clinging to their indie rock background.
That's just the thing. It's schizophrenic enough that it doesn't feel like straight up indie rock, but it's not schizophrenic enough to feel truly artistic or truly experimental. And I think that's where the problem lies in this song, is it's straddling the line, and it's not giving way to one or the other. Whereas at least the first track went more or less balls to the wall experimental. That's why it was scattered and all over the place.
And
this just makes you kind of not know what to do with yourself.
And this one had, as far as the outro is concerned here, there's no defense, because the outro did not work in context of this track, I feel, or in context of the next track. The outro is very bizarre, very creepy.
I agree.
Just a lot of sound bites going on there. It seems like an interlude for some sort of off-the-wall play.
It just didn't make sense.
Yeah, but between two kind of popish tracks, that's odd to me.
The next track we're talking about, of course, is My God is the Sun, so we go from strange lyrics to stranger lyrics.
This one was...
It is rockier.
It's more predictable in its nature, which, for me, made it more enjoyable and more accessible. Yes. I was able to actually get into the song a lot more easily, because this didn't have that really experimental nature that was halfway done.
I wouldn't say that If I Had a Tail was experimental.
Halfway experimental. It wasn't trying to be multiple things. This was trying to be a rock song. And it did it.
Yes.
Didn't do it, perfectly.
I mean, this song for me was the beginning of the upturn on the album. This song wasn't great. But...
this wasn't even trying to be rock. So this was rock. And it had a very smoother construction to it. But at the same time, I was not sure about those transitions. Those transitions, again, went through me. When you go from a verse to a chorus or a chorus to a verse, it's just, I'm not sure what they were driving at.
The pacing was still off.
Yeah.
in the song, which has been a problem throughout this album so far. They don't know when to go from an A to a B. Or they don't know how. And we've talked at length that a lot of times if you do a B section, it's easier to draw it back to the A. They didn't really have that ability. They were keeping them separate, which was a shame. The other issue is, as Matt said, this had some really weird lyrics. Even for this album, which is full of interesting, oblique words. This is talking about cleansing heathens. I don't know where they're going on this.
To me, at first, this song gave me this kind of feeling of, and it's when I started to sense themes within the songs individually, at least. It was this kind of like this want for guidance from a god, like someone to show him the way. But then it goes into that creepy, almost extremist perspective, which is disconcerting.
This might as well be gotten from the chorus itself. Might as well just read it. Healing like fire from a gun, kneeling, my God is the sun. Heal them with fire from above, kneeling, my God is the sun.
What's up with that?
It just seems like an extremist perspective, and it's very bizarre.
And a little...
We don't know everything here at Crash Chords. There could be a meaning we're missing, but the meanings that I gather are not terribly inviting.
Yeah.
So... They're disturbing. It's frankly a little disturbing.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that if that's part of the art. There's definitely eerie, disturbing imagery going on throughout this album. It's just, in the context of a rock track...
It just didn't make sense.
Could it be that they're just going for juxtaposition throughout here?
It could be. I don't...
There's one song
I feel like the lyrics are very detached from the song. The song is a very standard rock track, and then we have these bizarre, almost terrorist-like... lyrics. I mean, it is what it is. Let's call a stone. Like, it seems very extremist, religious extremist, and that has led to those kind of things.
And it had a waltz.
Yeah, okay, this is the thing. I understand. I mean, it's one for the other. Final track, final line here is, godless heathens always waltz in the sky, and then we go right into this very...
haunting waltz sound.
Yeah, it's a haunting waltz sound, the kind of things you might find in the more experimental side of the Beatles.
Yeah.
Trying to think of the specific example here. It almost like...
For the benefit
of Mr. Kite, exactly what I was thinking of.
It's clever in construction, but in execution, not so much. I didn't love the waltz section. Like, I understand what they were doing,
right,
and it was clever, but as far as the flow of the song went, it kind of killed it for me.
And just to make the comparison, since I started it, For the Benefit of Mr. Kite is a weird song throughout.
Right. Whereas this wasn't.
Yeah. Again,
being weird,
position
it's weird for weird's sake.
Yeah.
And I don't like weird for weird's sake.
And this one had... much more clear. I don't know. I don't know how to feel.
Moving on.
I don't know how to take it.
The next song, Steve, can you pronounce the song title for this one?
Calypsia. There's a definition to this word, which I had to look up because I had never heard it before. Very interesting definition. The delusion of things being more beautiful than they are. And I suppose until I looked up that definition, the song was really throwing me for a loop. And this is before I had settled on that juxtaposition idea for this album, or especially for songs individually, because the exposition of this track I thought was gorgeous.
Yeah.
Very artistic. Probably the more artistic side of anything that Queens of the Stone Age had ever done. And I just thought throwing these two sounds against one another, the sound of a breathing machine, like struggling for life, with romantic guitar overlaying it, I don't care who you are, that's going to invite some kind of emotion in you, for better or for worse. Yeah. It's very disturbing for me, but I think it's brilliant from an artistic standpoint. What I did not initially understand was the transition that followed, the B section, which is a flip of a coin.
It's just very heavy rock.
Heavy rock. Crashing almost.
I wrote a bunch of words about this B section that I cannot put on the air, because they are both politically incorrect and curse words. It really was a poor B section without the framework of the defined word.
But once Steve told me the definition, I pointed out this, especially with the heavy drug-related lyrics, I realized this song is a musical representation of this struggle between discerning how beautiful you feel something is and how beautiful it actually is. And that juxtaposition becomes more apparent when you know the meaning.
Especially when you're looking at the drug references here.
It starts with a reference, "Bye bye black balloon. Bye bye, I'll see you soon." Like, that is an obvious reference.
Mm.
It is especially with the creepy begin section, A section.
The breathing
really
machine.
very, very off-putting, very unsettling. But once you get that crux, it really becomes a cohesive piece. It grows on you. Once again, it's a piece that grows on you.
I'm going to call this the climax of the album, to be honest. Just because when you consider, like, this feels like the low point.
Yeah.
If there's any direct truth here to the breathing machine, if it's not just used as a soundbite, and I sincerely don't think it is, this feels like the ultimatum of drug use, which is hospitalization.
Yeah.
But in many ways, it still keeps the dream world present. Like, you haven't quite broken free of it, even though you're at the bottom of the rabbit hole.
Right, and a lot of people, even when they hit rock bottom, can't give up that dependency and still find a beauty in something that should not be beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think that's what this song is, in the end, getting at. And I think it accomplishes it. Musically, it's not the greatest, but conceptually, I think it's fantastic.
I think more could have been done with that A section,
I agree.
to be honest.
I agree.
I think that's such a beautiful artistic vision between the breathing machine and the romantic nature,
right?
The dreamlike qualities that I can't accept. I can't accept the thrashing guitar rock section as a viable alternative. Really, I don't see that as the other side of the picture for me. You know.
Yeah, but then how would you?
Then
do
again,
it different?
I'm not. I've never been at the bottom of the drug rabbit hole. So
for all we know, this could be something that was written because one of the band members or many of the band members might have hit a low point like that.
Indeed.
If I'm not mistaken, the rabbit hole is actually referenced in this song specifically.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Indeed.
Right.
Pretty common reference for.
Well, everybody loves to work off of Phallus.
The funny thing about this track also is, like, as we were getting the definition, I pretty much wrote that it feels like a struggle between fantasy and reality, and a lot of drug use actually is just that. This struggle between knowing what is and what you wish it was.
Which is why from a theme point of view, the next track, Fairweather Friends, is a great follow-up.
Yeah.
It really is. Conceptually, we're going to be using that word a lot. Conceptually, there's a lot of great ideas. Fairweather Friends, though, is not musically that good.
It's musically average, at best.
It's a stagnant track. It doesn't really go anywhere for me.
It's just another standard rock track with no ebb and flow.
It doesn't... It has accessibility that Collapsia didn't have.
This feels like an ode to friends gone by the wayside.
But the lyrics are really boring. They're very easy to tell to figure out beforehand. What's the word? Telegraph? You
use that word more than I do.
Yeah, I still don't know which word.
They were predictable, John. The word you're looking for is predictable.
There's one with the word tele.
Oh, Lord.
It definitely needs some work on its cohesive nature.
I'm going to start just analyzing this track again on the conceptual level by going straight to the end, because it's the only way this makes sense.
Yeah.
It's the whole entire track that had been very stagnant and unmoving throughout, all of a sudden just cuts out on a dime as if someone had just yanked the cord right out of the recording machine, and I don't give a shit about them anyway. That's the quote. That's the quote that the entire thing leads
The lead singer, Josh Homme, says at the end... I don't give a shit. And
that itself lends to this whole juxtaposed nature that you feel like you need something grander than is necessary. The divide between reality and between your perceptions of it.
This fantasy of friendship.
Fantasy of friendship, fantasy of meaning, fantasy of anything that you... The point is, it might not be as severe as you think it is.
Yeah.
You know. Therefore, just pull the plug. Leave it.
Be done. And move on. And as far as endings to songs go, it's probably one of my favorites in a while.
It's extremely pointed. Where was that in the rest of the track, though? That's my big issue.
But you wouldn't have that if you didn't have that.
But yeah, but if the song wasn't the way it was, the ending wouldn't be as pointed.
You wouldn't
That's
have
the
that,
point.
You wouldn't have that jolt at the end.
Yeah.
If you hadn't been unmoved for the last several minutes.
I would have rather have gotten moved.
Well, that's the thing. If it's gonna be an ode, it might as well have been something really grand.
and
maybe that's
useful.
it. Yeah,
I guess.
But then again, if he himself is having the onset of this thought throughout the track, then he wouldn't be too invested
It comes to a
either.
realization, yeah.
Yeah, but
If anything, they should
some of
have
these
made,
are stretches.
They've actually should have gone further, started at maybe a higher level and hit a much lower level of complexity of this song.
Yeah.
They could have dropped it out and just had him talking at the end. Maybe with a simple little beat.
Well, it's not our place to really just, insert ideas in his head here. I'm going to pull from the concept talk here and just talk about music for a second.
Oh, we're talking about...
That's what...
We're talking about music now?
That's what we do.
Oh, okay.
Another misleading intro. Wasn't on board with that. Had a nice, soft, grungy voice going throughout this track. Had a really fun pickup, but again, that's within the context of a fairly unchanging song. On the whole, it seemed like rock for rock's sake.
Yeah. It was another very kind of average track that was just rock for rock's sake, exactly.
Yeah. So you take out the theme, and there's just not much there for me to grab onto.
Yeah, but the theme is there.
The theme
We're
is
not
there.
taking it
Of
out.
course, of course.
So there's that,
But, it's...
No, I understand.
Gotta have all pieces working in tandem.
Right, and it's very easy to see where the song would fall apart without certain pieces.
Yeah. This is why I called it a concept album.
A song with all the pieces
is the next track. Smooth Sailing.
Oh, man. Now, here we go.
Are we in unanimous agreement that this is the best track on the record?
It's the best track on the record.
Okay.
Damn straight. This was... you know what? I got grunge Prince. Like, if Prince actually dirtied himself...
It's such a weird combo.
He dirtied himself enough to get away from his pop roots. It felt like that.
For me, this track was clearly groovy from moment one. It had this kind of Peter Gabriel-esque flow, like in the 80s when Peter Gabriel did solo stuff. But also this kind of theme music sound. It was like John put it as a modern Shaft's theme.
This is the bad mother effer that walking down the street can't be touched by society nowadays. He is the center of the universe in his own little world. This guy is not to be trifled with.
It's got a real funk flow to it. That's the thing. I mean, it's definitely groovy. You're going to get into it.
Some of my favorite line work. It's got great...
I wasn't as on board with this lyrically as other tracks.
It was very short lyrics. It was very clipped nature. I got bruises and hickeys, stitches and scars. Got my own theme music. It plays wherever I are.
See, but that's the thing. Like, that's not nothing brilliant to me. That's almost that self-indulgent music that I find in a lot of rap stuff.
No, that's what I'm saying. Well, okay. I hypnotize you and no one can find you. I blow my load over the status quo.
Yeah, this is exactly out of that ilk.
It's attitude.
Yeah, it's a song all about attitude. It's
attitude.
not what he's saying, it's how he's saying it.
I understand that. Right. And I did enjoy it on a musical standpoint.
Hence Shaft.
Get it.
Who's got more attitude?
I'm not arguing that point.
Yes.
Obviously it's attitude. It's just...
It had
egregious amounts of attitude.
Yeah, but it was enjoyable.
Yeah, for music.
And had a great solo.
Yeah, that's solo.
Solo, yeah, I really do love that.
Best solo on the
Very
album.
brief solo, too.
Yeah. Moving on to the track after, and this is where the album takes its strongest upturn. 8, 9, and 10 are by far the best tracks on the record, which is a shame because, as we've said in the past, when you put your best work at the very end, it kind of unbalances the record. But the next track is I Appear Missing, which is the single. It has a video, an animated video on YouTube, and it's a 6-minute single, which you don't see a lot. And, like, I couldn't get an emotional pull on it immediately, but I wrote down words like struggle and a journey, and when me and John talked it out, it really became, this song is the ever-present struggle within between sanity and insanity. And the song is just repetitive enough that it gives you that feel of insanity.
I felt like it was an argument between the id and the superego. Now, for those of you out there that have no idea what I'm talking about, I mean more the uncoordinated-based instinctual needs of a person versus the moral controlling force of that person.
Yeah, Forbidden Planet was all about that.
And it had some of the thought-provoking lines in the album.
Yeah. Lyrically, this is one of for me, one of my as much as I love Smooth Sailing, the lyrics on this track
were much deeper.
Much.
Just
much deeper, and musically speaking, I enjoyed this better. To be honest, I think I enjoyed this a little bit better than Smooth Sailing, just from a personal standpoint. I'm not always in the mood for just like heavy rock out too. Sometimes I want to chill.
But I love this line, and I really think about this line because it's grammatically correct as far as I know. One day I hope I'm someone you'd met.
Wow.
That is really clever.
Yeah.
Actually.
Right?
I mean, playing around with tense and whatnot. Yeah.
While still being accurate.
Speaking to, I hope one day that we are actually apart after being together. I mean, it's really...
I hope one day we have had really, like...
I know, right? It's really a very thought-provoking line.
Bringing in that...
And there's a couple in this song that really just make you scratch your head, which is why I'm getting a very deep psychological conflict going on here.
Messing with the past participles.
Yeah.
That's that's kind of important, because I think that's something that gets overlooked. And that's next level thinking right there. There's no shortage of love tracks. It's like, I want to get with you and stuff like that. This is like, life is short. It's sometimes in many of the cases the things that we hope for, it's almost silly to hope for them in the present or in the future. It would only fit your fantasy if it had occurred in the past that never existed and never will exist.
Yeah.
But when you're stuck in the fantasy that much of this album seems to be stuck in, it makes perfect sense. It seems like the ultimate daydream right here.
Yeah.
A debilitating daydream, should be noted. Which is why there's so much hauntingness going on around in this album. I mean, that's not a good thing for yourself, to get immersed in a daydream that you can't escape from and seems to be pulling you away from daily activities. That's what I...
Yeah, that's pretty much this song in a nutshell.
That was a lot less technical than my id versus super ego.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, you know...
I'm
talking to the layman here.
Moving into the conclusion of the record.
It's a little weird.
Like Clockwork, the title track of the record is tacked on at the end. Well, I don't want to say tacked on, because it is where it belongs. The problem with this song is it's a great conclusion, with the acceptance that it's a great conclusion to a concept album we never got.
I feel
I feel it's a great ending, but it's not great for this record. It's great for the last two tracks before it, but the whole record?
And that's the whole thing. It really does connect to the previous track. The previous track is about that... It's about playing with those tenses, and this track... previous track is not quite just playing with those tenses. It's also about his love interest. There's love there. There's someone there that he's speaking to. And this is a track where he doesn't want to move on from her.
Or him.
Or whomever.
No, you get this sense of hopelessness. It was masked as acceptance, this hopelessness that it won't get better. It'll come around, but it's never going to end.
And I still refute that it's hopeless. It feels like he still has almost dangerous desire for this person. He's hiding it behind.
Still, dangerous desire is almost hopeless, because it's inevitably going to destroy you.
I don't know. I almost want to go back on myself here. Like, I had come up with that idea that this was the end to a concept album that we never got, but at the same time, we've talked so much about this concept. It's starting to become
It's starting
a lot
to pull together. Yeah, that's true.
Hopelessness is the only logical conclusion. The idea that your daydream will never come true, as I just described earlier. This is that track.
But I don't feel like he's hopeless. I feel like he's still delusional.
I disagree with the way you broke down the lyrics and some of those specific lines.
You read them verbatim.
It's the epitome of hopelessness.
No, that's the whole thing. He never says that he's letting her go. He never even implies that.
But you can still
He implies that not letting her go will be bad for him. But he never...
But not letting go doesn't mean you're not hopeless. People time and time again in terrible relationships cling to things without any hope.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He doesn't feel the hopelessness. He's completely deluded himself at this point. It is over. He is holding on too long. But he's not hopeless because he won't accept that.
It's
This
kind
is
of a
full
cop out
delusion.
to go through the motions of this album to reach no conclusion whatsoever. I felt
Yeah,
the
I
tone,
know.
at least in the music itself, felt hopeless.
I felt it was a little.
It felt conclusionary.
Yeah.
I didn't quite feel. It didn't quite
Conclusive.
feel hopeless. It still had a little bit of a sweetness to it. I just can't
I just-
accept this pure
I
hopelessness.
can't really agree. I felt like this was the end. It's over.
The sweetness that you're hearing is what remains in his mind,
Yeah.
and it's that same past participle business. It's like you are imagining something that
Isn't there?
will have never taken place. It's a very, very strange way of putting it, but I think it's very brilliant, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, but then again, also, I mean, especially a good emotional track disconnects and misinterpretations and different interpretations. I mean, that points out to how
So
strong.
yeah, our disagreement is actually a positive thing in this respect.
because it kind of proves the
It's
track.
got depth.
Yeah.
It's-
It gives the
it's-
track that depth.
These last three tracks really had depth to them. Shallow to deep, but there was legitimate depth in a lot of the aspects that we're missing on the other tracks. This also
It's
has
depth in the phrasing, in the statement of it. It's the music itself that's going to really take it away from me, I think.
It also had some lines that I know even Steve wrote down a few, because this was
Right.
probably the most beautiful lyrics, the most poetic of the lyrics, with lines like "holding on too long is just a fear of letting go."
Not everything that goes around comes back around, you know.
It was actually the pretty stuff. It was finally just straight out pretty lyrics, and I
Not
really
pretty,
enjoy-
though. That's, like, I wrote it down.
poetic,
It is poetic, yeah,
Yeah,
but that's
poetic.
very general. You can say it's
pretty
poetic
in a
for anything.
poetic way. I did enjoy it for the poetry's sake.
Okay, alright, I'll buy that.
Get more explanatory in my definition of the word pretty.
Well,
Thanks, John.
But I enjoyed it very much for that. And these last three tracks were, I see the entire arc on this album, but it feels like the last three tracks were so much more divorced from the rest of it in quality.
That's amazing how I started off this this whole thing here by saying it was an okay album, but it was a poor concept album.
Now you're starting
Now-
to feel the other way around.
Yeah,
That it was a better concept album, but a poor
album.
quality album.
Poor is even a little bit of strong.
Yeah,
word.
I don't
it's
feel it's
okay.
poor. It's
okay.
okay.
Weak.
That's
in-
the reverse.
It's a bit of...
It's an okay. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, I'll
It's
speak
something.
for Steve. It's a great concept, poorly executed.
Not even poorly.
No.
I won't even go. I
Weak
won't be that harsh.
execution, just a weak execution.
An average execution. This album
There
isn't
you go.
bad on any level. It's not.
There's a
that
couple
I
tracks.
refute.
There's a couple tracks that I feel could have been totally dropped.
There are tracks that I feel are
But
bad.
we've still heard albums far worse with more terrible. This is above average, at least.
Oh yes,
in-
yes.
yeah.
No. I'm not saying we're not hitting like Green Day level here. All right.
No.
No. There is a lot of unusual ideas and a lot of great concept. There's a lot of concept in this album that is very smart.
Let's talk music itself, though. Let's just remove the concept. For a
Musically, it starts weak, heads strong.
second. Yes, I'll buy
It's a
that.
Progression.
Well, see, but that
Does that work in tandem with the concept itself as well?
no,
Because
And
I
don't
never
feel
have felt,
it works like
I
that.
don't feel the spiraling down of this concept. It feels like he never really. It does feel like there's a conclusion at the end, but it doesn't feel like. I'm trying to analyze the path of this man's insanity or drug
It's
binge
meandering.
or. Yeah, it could be anything. Honestly, it is meandering. We're pulling back and forth between the rock bottoms and the happy mediums.
And when you're disillusioned and you're delusional, wouldn't that... There's no structure to delusion. You can't structure delusion. It's delusion.
That's not 100% true. There are ways you can define delusion.
I feel like...
And there are forms that delusions fit. You're right in the idea that there's a lot of elements of chaos, but there's also a lot of elements of stability in delusional concepts and I felt they didn't really have enough stability in this album.
Yeah.
In the form of their instrumentation and their music and their vocal work that unified it.
I agree, and I'm also trying to look at the title here, Like Clockwork. I'm trying to figure out exactly how that works in. I almost am getting an idea that there's a repetitive, cyclical nature to what he's experiencing. That he's experienced it all before, and like clockwork, it will go the exact same way the next time around.
That seems to be the yeah, I mean...
That's my conclusion.
It's pretty apparent, especially in bad love, or love of any kind, a relationship, romantic or otherwise. If it's going poorly, you can almost predict what'll happen next if you see where it's going. And I think that's what the like clockwork represents.
Yeah.
This bad relationship is moving like clockwork.
Yeah, it's just a strange thing. My real beef is the tone of how this album started out. That's the crux of the matter.
I saw something.
What?
Think of the songs conceptually. We're starting. We're okay. Keep your eyes peeled. I sat by the ocean. The vampire of time and memory. Think of it as a journey. He becomes lost. He finds himself at an ocean. He loses himself. Starts to delusion. Worships this god. And becomes in and out of himself. Fair weather friends, smooth sailing. He drops his baggage and gets to a part where he reinvents himself and then loses an aspect of him and starts over.
It's a very specific plot line.
There's
almost,
but it's like there's
almost
something
autobiographical.
I feel like they were really going for something here. There is something they're going for here.
It's just not as clear as it could be.
It missed. It came close, but it missed. I definitely see a major theme in this song. In this album.
I'm going to point out the plot holes here. I don't.
Oh yeah, no. That's the whole thing. Big misses. It reads like a James Joyce book. I mean, big misses.
How do you defend If I Had a Tail?
No,
in that context?
that's the whole thing. There are some things that are hiccups, that are bumps in the road for this story.
Songs that were there for song's sake.
The whole smooth sailing into I Appear Missing, conceptually, I mean, song-wise, actually, I like it a lot, but conceptually doesn't quite fit that story they're telling. If I Had a Tail, why is it there? Why is it even in the story?
Yeah. Nothing here. Even just looking at the tone of these beginning tracks, I had expected that this was going to be haunting in a different way, just because of the whole vampire idea. The tone actually had this old school classic horror vibe to it. Like I felt Dracula. Perhaps seeing him on the cover, maybe that kind of made the connection for me. And then it evolved into something completely different. It seemed like that's a little bit of an inconsistency there, unless you automatically attribute haunting, as in horror haunting, legit like mythological horror, with the horror that you can experience in your own life. It's a different kind of thing for me. Maybe it's a comparison that would strike someone else more than it would be me. I don't know.
Alright. So where are you with this album then, would you say?
Where am I with this album? I'm giving this a 3.75.
Okay.
It's mainly for musical reasons.
Okay.
I really did enjoy the concept. The concept is very strong. 3.9. 3.9. I'm upgrading. 3.9. It's just shy of a 4 for all those conceptual reasons, but it's the music that hurts it. I wanted them to go balls to the wall with this idea. Like Paper Chase level.
Okay. And it has elements
And Paper
of that,
Chase, I believe
that.
I gave a 4.
If you don't know, I don't know.
I know what I gave.
Okay.
And we all gave it the same exact thing, actually. Because it was a very... You can't miss the concept in an album like like Hide the Kitchen Knives.
Yeah.
This one, we've been working kind of hard today.
Yeah.
And there's some stretches that we're making, especially with the Alley Cat reference.
We have stuff to discuss, which means there's content.
There is content there. It just feels like I almost get the sense that they may have been working with this idea and fiddling with it to the same extent that we're trying to make sense of it. That it lacks a little bit of cohesion.
Okay.
But once all said and done, I'm on board with the product.
For me, it's one of those things where I mean, I really like the record, I do. My struggle to give it a rating is it's clearly not a 3 and it's clearly not a 3.5. Just the same, and the more albums we review, the more we have to do more points because you're trying to fit it in with everything else. I want to give it a 4, I do, because I really do think it's a great album. It does something different, and it gets somewhere. But just the same, there are no tracks I hate, but there are definitely tracks that I kind of feel nothing or just kind of feel bored. I don't necessarily hate them, because I can kind of find some enjoyment or some interest in a boring track.
You throw me back down. 3.75 for me. I'm sorry.
Stick to something.
No, but you're making a good point. The concept, it's just not enough.
Yeah.
It's not enough.
I mean, considering also I know what Queens of the Stone Age is capable of, and they have a ton of 4 and 4-5 albums that I've loved.
Yeah.
And it's just for this, I mean, one of my favorite songs by them is Go With The Flow, which is one giant, long, raucous rock song, which is one huge metaphor for childbirth and pregnancy and sex. And it's just done so well, because it's not obvious. And it's just like, I feel like they have moments of that in this album, but I'm going to go 3.75. That was my rating too. I want to give it a 4. I do. I really do, but I can't when there are other bands that have just had kind of more of a consistency, at least, lending to it.
The comparison is right here. Moms by Menomina.
Yeah, which
I find very closely related to the idea that with that album, I enjoyed what they were doing. I enjoyed the track-by-track nature of it, and I was actually more into the music itself.
Yeah.
But it kind of lacked the cohesion of an overall meaning, which is why I rated that 3.5. This is getting the benefit of the doubt for an overall conception.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of work to establish something over the course of 10 tracks that bleeds into one another, and I think after some work, we did come up with a conclusion that seems to fit for the most part.
Yeah.
It's those holes that hurt it, and then it's the other side of the equation that's just musicality. I cannot escape the boring tracks, and even the ones that I'm really invested in, it's not at the top of my echelon.
It's hard when they and other bands have done so much more.
Exactly.
And I like them a lot, so that's why it's tough for me. But I give it a 3.75 also.
I said before we got here to Steve that I felt like this was an easy week for me to listen to the album. Because, honestly, I listened to it very passively before we got here. Before we dissected it and broke it down and everything like that. I think this album works best in a passive capacity.
I don't, actually.
I completely disagree.
Because if you're not paying attention, you can glaze over a lot of the things that I found wrong in the beginning of the album. It's difficult to pin down the best and the worst, but there's a lot of not quite there and a lot of that's kind of up there aspects in this album.
But I disagree with him on just these grounds. If I wasn't paying attention, I would be bored.
Yeah.
If I dropped my focus here, and I wouldn't even know that this thing happened, to be honest. Maybe the last track would have really grabbed me.
The standouts are when you focus on it.
Yeah.
Is how I feel as well.
Yeah.
The fun tracks...
I'm not saying that passive is the better way to listen to this album. I'm saying passive is an easy way to listen to this album. You can easily, very simply, listen to this album passively. We've done a lot of albums that you can't listen to passively.
Oh, I think that with it, I disagree with that. That it's difficult to listen to something passive. You can listen to just about anything passively if you have the zoning out capacity.
I'm just saying it works better than most in that aspect.
I don't think so.
Well, I do.
Okay.
Even look at the Daft Punk. Even look at that. Just for instance, those tracks, that's a catchiness that I think will grab you on a passive level as well as a focus level. I mean, I didn't even rate it that high. Well, I rated it highly for the concept, but still, those catchier tracks are more catchier than these catchy tracks. So passive, that's preferable to me.
I'm going with my original. No, I think this works very well as a passive album. But, getting into what I was getting into, like I was saying, there's nothing that's completely detrimental to this album. There's nothing that's completely amazing in this album from a musical standpoint. Conceptually, it definitely puts it above the rest of the herd. Because this is something that people don't normally do. Normally, you get easy to understand concepts about love and hate and fear and all that sort of stuff. This is a band definitely going outside what we would consider the standard generic comfort zone of music. Commendable. They didn't get there yet. They're not 100%. They're probably not even 80% of the way there yet. But it is a very, very ballsy move. And I respect them for doing something like this.
Oh, sure.
That right there, that's the best compliment you can give, is when an artist tries something dangerous and you respect them for it.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, 375 is not, as a whole, an average album. A 3-star album. It is a little bit above that. Primarily towards the ending. But there are songs there, and this I got to refute with you, Storm. There are songs there that I just dislike, flat out. But that concept really grabs me because it is a very interesting idea, and there are glimpses of brilliance in that idea, in how they did these things that I just can't refute. So yeah, 375.
All that reads the same number.
Well, we have different reasonings.
And we've always discussed how we have different reasoning. I mean, overall, the easiest way to wrap up this album is it's a listen/buy. It's
sample on iTunes. Definitely sample on iTunes.
It's a listen/buy. It's right in the middle because it's definitely worth hearing. But depending on where you fall in taste of music, and especially if you're a fan of Queens of the Stone Age, it's probably worth the buy. But I'd say it's like where some albums are clearly listen only or buy only. This is definitely right in that middle. It could go either way. You could either listen or buy this record.
I'll say this: this is probably the most you can do, concept-wise, with that bare bones rock style. Because when you really look at their music itself, I guess they're not going out on left field, really. Just in terms of their instrumentation, yes, they throw in a cello here and there. Yes, they throw in the chorus at the end. They throw in a little bit of string section at the very end. It's just, I still feel the rock. I still feel it there. It's the style that really lends to it. I don't know.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah,
this is definitely a rock. Ultra term rock album.
This is the closest we can get to the umbrella term rock as you can. And I've said that before about them. For a modern band, this is as close as you get as to something that's just rock.
Yeah. But for what they're doing, I would probably bump it to experimental.
Yeah.
Because of concept.
But
not for music.
Right. No, I agree.
Art?
Art rock, you mean?
Yeah.
There are shades of it, but I wouldn't lump it into the genre. I just don't feel. And
there's like 3 genres the 3 quantifiers that I like because they are so easy to slap onto some things. Art, as in art rock, art metal, art prog, and experimental. These are 3 concept words that we throw with other genres. That means we don't quite know how to define it now.
I would almost argue with that, just based on experimental being inherently individualist. There will always be experimental, there will always be art rock, just because you're never going to be able to pin something on it. That will always be specific to the composer themselves.
Well, no, that's what I mean. You cannot easily define them. You know they are something. You know they are metal. You know they are pop.
And all things considered, this is kind of it's almost a safe choice when you really think about it, just because the concept that they constructed enabled them to stay within the rock form, to create that juxtaposition idea. They'll pull away, but they can always go back. And when they go back, it's always rock.
Yeah, and I'm conflicted about... let's take a minute to talk about safety in music to begin with. Because this is something we've mentioned a lot on the podcast. We've never really kind of dived into it. And I just feel like... it's not just pop though.
Yeah,
Every
that's
genre,
true. Yeah.
every genre has a safe sound. Every single genre.
That safe sound probably is pop.
Pop.
I'm gonna say this. I'm pretty sure I'm not doing this album on the podcast, so I might as well talk about it just a little bit. Jamie Cullum, his new album, I believe it was The Migration. I may have that wrong, but
I saw that online, and I think you're correct.
I think, yeah. In any case, compare that to his previous album, The Pursuit. Now, I know that he has some pop jazz elements, right? And that's why I bring this up, because it's not pop rock. We're breaking away from rock. It's just jazz. Jazz itself has its pop side.
Yeah.
And he has had pop jazz influences, but yet Pursuit was totally jazz. He was able to go freewheeling in that album, and I thought it was just brilliant. It was really him exploring the more experimental of his own personal side, which is why the most recent album, this year's album, I believe Migration, it just went right back to pop, and I was very unimpressed. Which is why I'm probably not going to use it as an example for the podcast, because I would love to bring you a jazz album, right. And it just seems pointless to start out a jazz discussion with something that's just as safe.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, the thing about safety in music for me is, I feel like some safety is not that terrible. I feel like, you know, putting together a safe track that your fans can get on board with, especially for marketing an album, is not necessarily a bad thing. However, when you do an entire album that's safe, like when we were talking about Hoobastank, who we didn't rate very unfavorably, but in reality, they had a little bit of rock, but the majority of the record was this safe sound.
Just to be clear, this album is not safe throughout.
No.
Yeah. So in many ways, you could say that this fits your criteria in any case, because they pull away in some moments, but they go back. It's just more like...
My rating...
It's my fighting between cohesion and...
My rating was more on an emotional and conceptual standpoint than a musical standpoint. I liked most of the music. I liked most of the music on the record, but conceptually and emotionally...
Yeah, we were pretty much
in agreement. It was lacking.
In our most general terms, we were in agreement. Now, the concept of using what we consider pop, the safety net, is that you create a touchstone in an album, something people can identify with. Regardless of the genre you're doing, if you do something where people can easily go, oh, I recognize that, I get that, in as a song or as interspersed as parts of songs, that touchstone can really make very unusual ideas more accessible.
Well, yeah, that's like the Robbie Williams record that we reviewed. His single was very safe. It was a powerful pop.
It was solid track. Pop through and through.
And then it pulled you into this record that had this kind of arc that we didn't see coming.
It was a touchstone. Now, for
but
that aspect,
arc, and you said this, John, that arc was done within a safe framework.
Yes,
musically,
absolutely.
Yeah. But like that's what we consider pop, and what people like Rolling Stones and Metacritic label as pop rock, because pop and rock has kind of been lumped together nowadays. And you think of classic rock, it also has its safety elements. It has its touchstone. On the flip side, experimental and art-oriented pieces also have a safety net, but in a different way. They're allowed to be deviant and weird and really make people go, that was uncool, but it's art. You're allowed to do that. It's experimental. He's trying something new. You're allowed to do that. It's got that same sort of recognition of, oh, it's acceptable because of its concept.
Yeah, and we're not casting any stones here. Obviously, you're allowed to do whatever you want.
Of course.
Obviously. Long run. I mean, well, also, so talking about safety, I feel like the best way to personify safety in music, but making it successful, not necessarily for all fans, but for them as a band, Aerosmith. Aerosmith is the epitome of safety in classic rock music. They put out records, and every record is more or less very similar. However, every time they do it, it sells like crazy. It does well. Kiss also, especially in the later years, the epitome of safety in music, but still making it successful. How many times did Kiss have farewell tours and still come back? Because people want to see them play. And it's the same thing. Their act hasn't changed in a very long time. But people go see and in fact, Aerosmith and Kiss have toured many times together. Because these are two huge, larger-than-life classic rock bands.
And they draw from the same group of individuals.
But yet they haven't really changed anything over the years, and it's just universally accepted within their fan group.
Because marketing-wise, it makes no sense for them not to be safe at this point. And that is almost kind of a sad thing. That's you getting sucked into the vacuum of pop culture there, where you're really not allowed to change anymore or be individualistic, because then people are going to jump down your throat. Which is why I do respect older artists that go in other directions, even if it means they get teared apart.
Like Metallica. Metallica was safe, more or less, in their music up until the Black Album and even Load and Reload. And then Saint Anger and the one that came after it, Death Album. No, not Death Album. Death Magnetic. Those two records, Death Magnetic, which was a better quality, but when Saint Anger came out, they panned it. Critics, fans, hated it because they tried to do a new metal sound as Metallica, and people hated it. But they tried something different, and I respected that, and actually still like some of the tracks on that record. Like Some Kind of Monster is a great track because it's so different from Metallica, and it showed they were trying something new.
Well, not every band is allowed to really reinvent itself. That's another aspect of this. Bands will do safety net pieces, will do what their fans want, because not everybody can be, Rush. They can't reinvent themselves every few years. Because you have to make a theme of that. You have to do that from the inception.
Even Rush's level of reinventedness, you still hear Rush in there.
Yeah, of course.
I feel like that's not the same extreme of reinventing.
Yeah, but they experiment. They always try something.
What's going on today is far more extreme.
I can talk about an extreme of reinvention because they're a band that's pretty much composed of random bits that can change. That's the Gorillaz. And we always come back to the Gorillaz when we're talking about stuff. They reinvent themselves.
That goes on to the same thing.
Every record.
And our friend Pete never lets me down with it, because every single time I hear Gorillaz on I can never seem to identify them. Now, that could work against them or for them. In this case, I'm willing to say for them, just because I like the fact that I'm always intrigued. I'm always surprised. Wow, that's the Gorillaz? That sounds nothing like that last... That sounds nothing like that last track. That sounds nothing like that last track.
You're the sort of band that if you like them, you have a favorite album because it's a specific style you like.
Yeah.
Yeah. I still love Demon Days.
Demon Days is my favorite.
Even Demon Days is kind of a hodgepodge of songs. There is a loose sound. I'm not going to say arc, but sound to it all.
Yeah, and same with Plastic Beach. Also is very kind of all over the place, but works as a record. I mean, the Gorillaz are a band, and Damien, I can't remember his last name, but the lead singer of Blur, who, is at the center of this creation of this band, he's done so much to just do something different, and he's one of the poster children for doing different for the sake of different, but still making something beautiful. And it doesn't work every time. They have plenty of songs that I don't like, but as a whole, I love the band and I love their work. And when it comes together so well. Songs like Melancholy... what is it? Melancholy Beach?
No.
What is it? Melancholy something. But it's songs like that, or even the singles that they've done. Like, look at Clint Eastwood. It's such a simple song, but it's the catchy verse versus catchy chorus versus the interesting rap verses. Like, that's what makes that song shine.
Finally, someone let me out of my cave.
And even the video, like, that's also artistically and conceptually and experimental. Their videos are never the same every time. They always do something different, whether it's storytelling or just pure animation,
real life aspects,
or live action. Yeah,
or maybe they're just driving around on a Hot Wheels track. I don't know.
It's
2000.
We've talked about this before. Bands that have an overarching sound to the work that they create throughout their discography. They're always going to have something definable, or especially if it's an album with a concept to it. And I discussed Decemberists for that.
Sure,
because
do they have anything new coming out, the Decemberists? Because I've recently gotten into them.
Their last thing was 2011, so I guess they're due-ish. Okay. No, wait, they had one thing after The King is Dead.
EP?
It was like The King's Alive or something. I forget. Oh. But
anyway,
in any case,
I thought it was a super
I feel like this is not the same kind of... That's not the same kind of safety. That would be safe for your sound.
Yeah.
Which people aren't as judgmental against because people like their sound.
Well,
but now, it's one thing if you create the sound that other bands follow up on, and then another band, like, far down the line, like 10 years later, they attach themselves to the same exact sound, then people are a lot more critical.
Yeah.
Or at least I'm a lot more critical. Because then it's like, you didn't create that, you just attached yourself to it. You can love it, you can... Like, I can't fault you, I'm sure that you still have you can still rear an audience. It's just, it's not as inherently inventive.
Right. Well, that's more reminiscent of him. And the safety, like... Their music is their music. It's this love metal that they created, and if you like them, you'll like all of their records. Most of them
I hadn't
stick to
heard
that
the
structure.
progression of it, so I wouldn't have said that they had created it because I had heard it somewhere before. But they've clearly been around for a while. So,
but my point more is that that's a safety where if you're a fan, you're a fan. You'll probably like it anyway. You know, there's little that you could say. I compare it to the video game world and how, and a lot of reviewers have said this. When a new Halo game comes out, even if it's the worst game ever made, not necessarily is, but even if it is.
yeah.
It doesn't matter because Halo fans are going to buy it,
of course.
and that's it. Yahtzee, who does Zero Punctuation on The Escapist, does a video review of games, and when he reviewed Halo 3 back in the day, at the end of his review, he said it didn't matter if it's covered in dog doo-doo. Like, it doesn't. If a Halo fan wants it, they'll buy it, no matter what he says. And it's true. Some bands, even if we review it and give it some kind of a rating, you know, some rabid followings, it won't matter.
Bowling for Soup comes out with an album tomorrow. It's going to be bought by their fans.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. Like, you really gotta do something stupid. And we'll talk about someone who did something stupid. Green Day did something stupid.
Yeah.
Because they actually went art. They did that, we're gonna do something weird with our newest albums. Where they went American Idiot, which was hailing back to the concept album, to the rock opera. They were like, we've been heading this way for years, and they did something different. They left their safety net. They left their more standardized alt punk and tried experimentation. And
For Green Day.
Right.
Within their vein.
But Green Day was on a track. Green Day was on a track to become a classic pop rock band. To hit this kind of level of they're just a big pop rock band. They were in the direction of Aerosmith. They were heading that way.
I'll buy
that.
I'll buy that.
But
based on popularity alone, I'll buy that.
That's because they were within their work, within their compatriots, contemporaries. They were
heading
experimental. They were experimental for what they were.
They were just trying something different. They were creating this framework.
No, I'm talking from the beginning.
Yeah.
They started off really experimental.
But
within
the
punk
stupid
genre.
choice was the trilogy.
Yeah.
Which is
to
play
just
safe.
abandon that notion
and revert back.
Yeah.
And that was when you this is... Thank you for bringing this up, John.
You're welcome.
This is the poster for when safety goes wrong. They went back to a safer sound, and it was awful. It was awful for punk pop, punk pop rock, period. Let alone for Green Day.
There was a lot of peas
Because it does
right
not
there.
strike me as the kind of sound that really grows with you.
No.
With you maturing wise, it just does not seem to...
What, punk in general?
Yeah, I'm almost willing to make that
I
blanket
can
statement.
only disagree because...
At least that style of
No,
punk.
I guess. You have to go somewhere with the punk. Because, again, the reason Blink-182's newest album worked is because there were elements of punk, but they went in a more pop rock direction, and they tried something a little different that carried.
Right.
They went the Green Day direction.
But at the same time, we got one of my favorite bands that a lot of people hate on, their newest stuff, Weezer, because they experimented. And this is a band that experimented from its beginning.
It's been a while
within
since
its
you made
genre.
a Weezer reference. It's been a while.
But a lot of people hate Ratitude, Happy Records, because it was really weird for them.
And I mean,
It was very much...
And that's where safety comes from, is you run the risk of, well, do I try some... And I have to respect Linkin Park for this. Going back to that album that I think we rated kind of harsh by our standards now. No. I've re-listened to some of the tracks. I think we were a little hard on the album as a whole, but...
I looked back on it, I would have rated it higher.
Comparatively. But let me...
Just a bit.
But let me get my point out. My point with Linkin Park...
0.2 higher?
My point with Linkin Park is... Mike Shinoda has always gone on social media and talked about how he's trying different things. And whether we loved or hated that record, it was very different from the previous records. And they're trying something different. And as a band, and he'd said in interviews, I don't know if our fans are going to like it. I don't know if our fans are going to love it or hate it, but I like it. I like what we're trying to do. And as an artist, when it comes down to it, if you can live with yourself for what you do, and what you do makes you happy, yes, if the critics pan it, that stinks. It really does. And especially in a social media world where it's so much easier to get your horrible opinions to the people who don't even want to hear it, I have to at least respect a band like Linkin Park where they tried something different, and he knows he's trying something different, and he can live with it. Whereas on the flip side, a band that deserves to be panned, Maroon 5, where Adam Levine said, hey, it's my show now, I'm going to create these pop tracks that are super safe, and I'm not going to try anything new, or be my band.
It's funny you bring that up, because at the end of Overexposed, he did try a few new things. There was... But it's not so much that he tried new things as that he just attached himself to other genres. It's like...
And that's my problem, is...
A medley.
At least I can favor Linkin Park because they tried something different, you know?
It was an integration, though. It was an integration with the techno sound into their work.
And again, it comes down to, as an artist, and I think this is a good point to kind of direct... Because, I mean, we could talk about safety and compare... I mean, this is a listing topic. We're going to pull bands up. But to wrap it up, this is... There's a fine line between safety and failure. There's this notion that if you stay safe, you won't fail. But even that can lead to failure. But there's also experimentation can lead to failure just as easily.
It's being a smart marketer as well as a smart composer or writer, songwriter. And you need to understand the trends, I suppose. And this is if you're really concerned with the critics. You know, if you're not concerned with the critics, then of course, do whatever you want.
Like, I can guarantee a band like Flying Lotus does not give a damn what the critics think.
Oh, I'm sure he doesn't.
He just did what he wanted to do. And I think that's just... In music, you've got to respect that. I didn't like that album at all, but you've got to have some shred of respect for someone who will do what they want, regardless of what the fans think. You know, and Metallica even did that back then with Saint Anger, which I was talking about. And I think, ultimately, as a musician, that's what you should aspire to, is to make music for you. If you're making music for you and what you want to do, everything else is what it is. I mean, that's really the heart of it. Music is self-expression. Yes, you want people to connect, but you want them to connect with what you feel, what you put out there, what you create. It's about you.
Yep.
You can make songs about other people too, but it's your impressions of other people, of other emotions. When it comes down to music is expressing yourself. And that's why safety can be a double-edged sword. Because if you're expressing yourself in a safe way, well, that's how you feel, so critics may not like it, but if you do, I think that's really where this is grounded.
Cheers.
So, John, wait, before we get to next week's album, Steve, why don't we jump out of safety and into some spam? Let's swim around in it.
Anything but safe. It's always scary what we get.
Horrifying.
Out of the spam box. MCM huge funneling. These women are often, or are all of those quotes kind of helping you towards the kinds of weight? That probably shouldn't have had quotes. They are indeed women. I not saying this is a crying game kind of thing I describing. The kinds of women who MCM? MCMume.japanby.jp. Didn't MCM? Monolife, japanby.jp. Say, go to school on an English scholarship, or join the math team, or memorize classic chess opening gambits. These girls have a level of product knowledge that usually hovers somewhere between, you really want to know that? Wouldn't you rather I just lean over and sign this calendar picture of me? Are you one of those MCM City, japanby.jp, Poindexter guys? Talk to that guy over there. He actually works here. SMES, Yakaromi.
What the F? They just get weirder.
Dude, no.
Whenever I don't think they get weirder.
No. We're slowing you down. And we're throwing a beat over that. Because that was
We're auto-tuning that.
Oh, Lord.
We should totally auto-tune that.
It's Sade.
Wow. I want to move on as quickly as possible. John. Nice. John, what's our album next week?
I'm on a boat. No, next week we are going to have the latest rendition of the Bare Naked Ladies with their album Grinning Streak. Yeah, I kind of doing this one.
Oh, Lord.
I thoroughly enjoy the Bare Naked Ladies.
It's been a while, and it's been a while since John's intentionally pissed off Steve.
And B, you know who doesn't enjoy the Bare Naked Ladies? Steve. Steve doesn't like
This-
them.
Hi, how's it going?
We've been on.
I'm
To be
Steve.
fair, we've been on an even streak for a while, and this is outside our safety zone.
And honestly, you know what?
I'll be good. I'm always good.
I have not heard a darn thing from it, but it's the Bare Naked Ladies.
I'm
This
actually
is-
seeing them at the end of the month. They're
It's-
playing with Ben Folds and Guster.
Alright, they're with Ben Folds, so right there, you gotta like them. That's like a plus in the column.
I don't know. It often doesn't mean anything when they're paired together.
Well, it's not like they're paired with Diana Ross or something.
Well, yeah, but that would mean even less.
Exactly.
Thank you guys for listening. As always, please email us, crashchordsblog@gmail.com. Questions, comments, tell us we suck. I don't care. We have a donate button on the website. Give us your money so we can make it better. That would be nice because we don't really have much. We want to improve the podcast and give you more. We're working towards some other themes and some fun stuff to do. Hopefully have some more interviews. Big announcement. I think I mentioned in brief last week. I'm working with Broken Records magazine. My friend Scott runs it. It's an online mag. I submitted questions for an online interview for 311. The article should be going up soon, and when it does, I will be able to link it to our website as well. But Scott's already told me he wants to put me in for some phone interviews as well, so we may have some more interesting content and actual articles besides the podcast coming soon. So Steve has promised, and I'm calling him out here on the podcast, he will have a new article up by the end of the week.
I will.
What's
So
really
keep an eye
cool
on
is you
that.
can easily edit that part out,
He could.
but not the
I
rest
am
of
that
it.
guy. That's right.
You are that
I
guy.
could totally
You can
subvert
edit
you.
it, but it's going to be really hard because I'm going to do a continuous talking thing because you're not going to be able to edit out the me talking about you
No,
editing
I
it out.
can very easily
No, I
edit
don't
this
think
out.
you're going to be able to do
I'm
that.
pretty sure
And
I can.
No, I don't.
John,
think so.
shut
It's
up.
not that hard
No.
at all.
In closing, and as always, music is life,
And
life is good.